Hi everybody, it's Rebecca Virginia, and in today's video, I'm going to be bringing you 4 brand new spring DIYs. Our first DIY is, I think, my favorite one, and it is this adorable bunny DIY using some free paint sticks as a fence. Here are all of the supplies you'll need to recreate this. The most important supply in this DIY are a set of paint sticks. I actually picked these up from Home Depot. If you go to the paint section, you can usually get them for free. I asked if they sold them and the guy just gave me a bunch of them, which was really nice. And then a couple of the paint sticks are actually ones that I had and I have used before. I'm taking the shade Elephant by Waverly and I am painting all of the paint sticks. Eventually we will take some white paint and really distress them. So the gray is really going to be more of the secondary color. They're going to be mainly white, but just to get a good base down, I am laying down the gray color. All right, and now comes the main color. I am taking some white paint and very heavy-handedly distressing these paint sticks. I really want white to be the main color, just with bits of gray poking through. So I'm going in pretty heavy-handed, and I wouldn't even say distressing as much as just painting. And a couple of the paint sticks, when I flipped them over, got stuck to the craft paper that I'm painting on. So I flipped both ends of the paint stick so I can paint both and it'll look better. I plan to probably put this on my mantle, I think, for Easter, but if I don't, at least I know that the back will look good too because they will also be painted and all finished. I'm definitely trying to consciously do that more with my projects, paint the backs of them so it's not like when you turn the project around it's really ugly on one side and not painted or finished, but it does take a bit more time. But that's kind of one of my crafting resolutions for the new year, is to finish both the front and back of all of my crafting projects. So for this, I cut out a bunny and I could not find any Easter stuff in my Dollar Trees except for some jute carrots and a couple wood ornaments. They just really haven't come out with the Easter stuff yet, but I already wanted to start decorating. So I kind of had to make this on my own. I found a bunny silhouette image on Google and then I printed it out and traced it onto this. It's called a craft board. It is thicker than a paper, but not as thick as cardboard. If you see it in your Hobby Lobby or Michael's, it again is called craft board. To cover the board, I traced the bunny out onto a white washcloth and then cut it out before hot gluing it. I liked using the washcloth better than scrapbooking paper, not only for the texture, I thought it resembled more of a bunny's fur, but also you didn't have to be quite as precise when you were cutting it out. There were a few sections where I might have cut a bit too much, but because it was a washcloth, I was able to pull and stretch the fabric a little bit to make sure that none of the craft board was peeking out from underneath of our washcloth. For the bunny's bow, I tried a little bit of a different bow than I usually do. I went with a X bow and I took some burlap ribbon as well as this kind of dark orange and brown gingham pattern. And I laid the orange on top of the burlap and then I just made an X, and then to tie it all together and cinch it in at the middle, I took this lime green colored ribbon and just tied that into a knot. And then once that bow was ready to go, I put it on to the bunny and was able to figure out how short I wanted the bow and was able to cut it a little bit more. A good tip if you want to make the dovetails on the ends, or in this case the ends and the tops of my ribbon, you can just fold the ribbon in half and cut at a slight angle like I'm doing right now, and that will create that dovetail effect for you. All right, so now is the really exciting part because we are going to create our fence. And I didn't get too precise. I didn't bring out the measuring tape. I just kind of eyeballed how far apart I wanted the paint sticks to be. 2 of the paint sticks, I cut off that area where it kind of bows in. And so that's how I knew how long I wanted my fence to be and how much space needed to be in between each of them. And then once I knew how long or wide the fence needed to be, I just kind of eyeballed and spaced out the paint sticks from there. I did start with the the bottom one and kind of stand the paint sticks up just to make sure that all of them touched the ground and there wasn't one that was higher up than another, because then it wouldn't be able to stand on its own. And once the bottom fence was on, it was easy to just hot glue the top section on as well. After that, I hot glued down our bunny into the center lower part of the fence and just pressed down to make sure that he stayed in place. Now we are going to finish off our bunny fence with some embellishments. I got this amazing super long strand of wood beads in the fall, but I have seen in some lucky people's Dollar Trees they are coming out with these again. So if you see them, definitely pick them up. And to act as a thread, I took these really tiny scissors from the Dollar Tree and wrapped the jute around them so that I could thread it through the jute carrot. And then on the other end, I also placed 3 of the small wooden Dollar Tree beads. So once I had both of my carrot bead garlands ready to go, it was time to tie them on opposite ends of the fence. I had the jute going around the 2 outer to the right and to the left paint sticks, and this was kind of hard to show on camera. I knew where I wanted the carrots to hang, but then flipping it over and tying it, I was trying to stay in the shot, but also trying to make sure the carrots didn't move around. So this was actually easy to do. It was just hard to do on camera, so it might look a little bit difficult. But all that I did was put them in the back and hot glue them into place, and then I adjusted the carrot and the beads to make sure that it still looked good. And I did add a little bit of hot glue to the carrot just to make sure that that stayed in place and it didn't move around too much. There are so many different ways to use paint sticks. I'm definitely going to be using them in future DIYs. Let me know in the comments down below if you've ever used them in a craft project. Next up is a very easy to make rustic spring DIY using some unlikely supplies from the garden section of the Dollar Tree. Here are all of the other things that you'll need to recreate this project. The first step in this project is going to be painting these styrofoam Easter eggs. I said it earlier, my Dollar Tree doesn't have a ton of Easter or even spring stuff out yet, but luckily I did snag this bag of styrofoam eggs. I know that they came out with the craft eggs last year too, so I was happy to see them again. I did paint them white even though they already came white, and then I was just flicking some of this dark brown paint onto them to give it a speckled effect. While I waited for the paint to dry on the eggs, I moved on to the picture frame, which is going to be the main base for this DIY. So I took out all of the backing and the glass from the picture frame, and also you could see these little black stoppers that hold the contents in place. So I just took some needle nose pliers and just pulled those out. They come out really easy in the Dollar Tree frames so that they wouldn't be seen. Then I took my Waverly white chalk paint and painted the entire brown frame in this white color. And I did end up using about 2 coats to make sure that the entire frame was completely opaque and covered. And to turn it from this modern white into a nice rustic farmhouse DIY, I am of course distressing it with my favorite dark brown paint from Apple Barrel in Burnt Umber. I also took an Apple Barrel chip brush. This is really nice to use while you're distressing, and I am just dirtying this up, making sure that I keep my brush going in one direction. So I am just going all around the edges and the center area, adding in that brown color. So now we're taking the unlikely supply that is found in the Dollar Tree garden section. I've seen this each spring, so keep your eye out because they go really quick, and it is chicken wire. But of course, we're not going to be using it in gardening or to keep any chickens at bay. We're going to be using it for decor, and I am just adding hot glue to keep all of this in place. Usually I will use binder clips instead of my fingers to be able to hold this down while the glue dries, but in this case the frame was too thick so the binder clips couldn't fit, so I just had to put on a YouTube video to keep myself company while I held the chicken wire in place until the glue dried. To form the egg wreath, at first I thought about getting a long piece of floral wire and threading that through the styrofoam eggs, but a much easier way to do it was just using hot glue. The only difficult part was figuring out how many eggs that I wanted to use. At one point I removed an egg, but I did decide that 7 looked really good, so I kept all of them. And the nice thing about the hot glue is that it was very flexible and pliable, so I was able to really mold the wreath and make sure that it had a nice shape and wasn't turning into an oval rather than a circular wreath. And to finish off the wreath, I took some raffia and just made a double bow before hot gluing that on to the top section of our egg wreath. For the last step, I hot glued the egg wreath onto the frame section to complete the DIY. I really love this DIY because it's a very subtle hint of spring to your regular decor. So if you're not huge into seasonal decor, I think this is a really nice way to incorporate spring. The next DIY requires very minimal supplies, and the main one you can actually find in your own backyard. Here's everything else that you'll need to make this DIY on your own. Like I said in the first DIY, I just haven't been able to find very much Easter decor or Easter craft supplies at my Dollar Tree. And one of the things that I was really looking for was a sign that had a bunny cutout on it, but we still only have Valentine's Day stuff up at my Dollar Trees. Let me know in the comments below if you've been getting any Easter stuff in. So just like the first DIY, I found a bunny silhouette image on Google and just used that to trace out this bunny shape on some craft board. So that's what I'm going to be using today. And like I said, also, the main supply in this is going to be sticks that I just found outside in my backyard. My puppy helped me. He was very good at finding the sticks, but not so good at letting me take the sticks from his mouth. But you know, he tried. And what I'm doing at first, so I got a bunch of the sticks and I started breaking them off to try to get them to fit perfectly onto this bunny silhouette. I did use the puzzle saver. It's basically like a Mod Podge. That's the only way I can really describe it. I haven't been able to find a difference between it and Mod Podge, but I used that for the majority. I did go back in with a glue stick, which I'll show you in just a moment. But for the majority of the bunny, I am just using this puzzle saver glue and laying down different bits of the twigs. It kind of was like a puzzle because I found certain twigs really fit with this shape, or one worked for the curve of the bunny. So I'm just laying down a bunch of the sticks and breaking them so that they fit perfectly into the bunny silhouette. I continued fitting the sticks and breaking them like puzzle pieces to fit within the bunny, but then when I got to the ears section, some of the points of the ears were so tiny it was really hard to cut the sticks that small, so I ended up just hot gluing down some of the sticks, and I used hot glue here, one because I got impatient and didn't want to wait the 30 minutes to an hour for the puzzle saver glue to dry, and second, for the ears, I really wanted to make sure that everything was down and secure. So this is when I switched over to the hot glue gun, and you can see I took my miter shears, my favorite ones off Amazon. I always have them linked down below in my Amazon favorites, and once I had all of the sticks lined up, I just took the miter shears and cut off any excess pieces of the twigs and the sticks, and this worked out really well. And then for the second ear, a lot of the pieces that I had cut off from the first ear fit pretty perfect onto that second ear. Then we're moving on to what I think is one of the hardest DIYs I have ever done, and it's probably very easy for a lot of you, and you might laugh, but I made my first pom-pom. So I picked up this pom-pom maker at the Dollar Tree, and the directions on the back just made like no sense. So this is actually my 5th attempt at a pom-pom, first attempt creating, I think, a pretty good pom-pom. So what you're gonna do is pull out, I don't even know what you call these, but the two things that swing out, and you're gonna swing both of them out. They kind of create like an S, and start wrapping your yarn around the two of these, and just go ahead and keep wrapping and wrapping. The more yarn that you wrap around this, I'll call it a rainbow because it kind of looks like a rainbow to me. The more yarn that you wrap around the rainbow, the thicker and more voluminous your pom-pom is going to be. Just make sure that you don't get any of the yarn trapped in the feet area. So this, I'm calling it the feet because it looks like the footer on a sewing machine. You're going to close your rainbow so that it is now touching the other rainbow. Pull the yarn through the feet and then start wrapping it around this second rainbow. I hope that maybe combined with this voiceover and the visual that this will make sense. If it doesn't, there are dedicated like 20-minute videos on YouTube on how to create a pom-pom, probably better than I'm explaining. So you can always check those out. And now I'm doing the exact same process, just covering this rainbow in a bunch of the white yarn, just looping it and looping it and looping it. You're going to go ahead and snip off the end and close that second rainbow. So now you have this circle shape, and here is when you can go in with some scissors and cut all of the yarn down the center. This is why those two little prongs were used together, so that you now have this section where you can slip your scissors in and cut the yarn of your pom-pom. And once you have cut this section, you are going to take a second piece of yarn and thread this through the middle of the circle and tie a knot. So this is going to be what actually keeps your pom-pom held together, and the yarn fits very easily inside of the pom-pom maker. You can do a double knot if you think that's necessary. I just did one and thought that that was secure enough. So then you have tied your pom-pom, you are able to open up those rainbow prongs again, and then you're going to pull, and I kind of had to pull a little bit harder than I thought, and your pom-pom will come out. Also, all the Dollar Tree pieces fell apart. I looked at some YouTube videos, and that doesn't usually happen, but they snap back together really easily, and I was able to put it back together. So I'm not sure if that's supposed to happen. Maybe consider investing in one from Michaels or Hobby Lobby if you're an avid pom-pom maker, but you probably already knew this. But for me, who doesn't really make pom-poms except on the rare occasion, the Dollar Tree one actually worked out pretty well for me. So I trimmed down my bunny's cotton tail and then hot glued it to its little bum and added a raffia bow. This was a very rustic, outdoorsy rabbit, so I wanted to add a little bit of greenery, some florals and foliage to him. So I took some little bits of a spring floral pick that I actually had from last year. I hope they bring these out again. And I added a couple of green leaves underneath the bow, as well as some really pretty purple flowers. Now we are going to move on to what will be displaying our twig or stick bunny. So I grabbed one of the medium-sized canvases from the Crafter's Square section at the Dollar Tree, and then I took some scrap burlap that I had. I used it in a Valentine's Day DIY, and I had some left over. And I'm going to be covering the canvas with the burlap. And I realized during this DIY that I don't own a stapler. I need to pick one up next time I'm at the Dollar Tree. So I used hot glue rather than staples to adhere the burlap onto the canvas. I trimmed off the edges of the burlap because when I folded it over the canvas, it was a little bit bulky in the back and I want it to be able to lean flatly against a wall. So I'm just cutting off any of that excess fabric. And then it was time to attach my bunny to the canvas. But as I was looking at it, I originally wanted to do a paint stick border so it looked like some more faux wood, but the paint sticks were a little bit too large for this smaller canvas and it would take up too much. You wouldn't really see the burlap. So I went into my craft stash and I saw that I had these really large skewers from the Dollar Tree, some wooden skewers. I believe they're for s'mores, so you don't have to get too close to the fire. And I thought this would make a really good smaller border than the paint stick or even rulers. So similar to the first DIY, I'm using this dark gray color called Elephant to paint the skewers, and then I distress them with some white paint. And once again, using my handy dandy miter shears to cut down the skewers to fit the canvas so it would frame it really nicely. I put down the top one first and then had the two on the left and the right coming down off of the top one, and then finished it off by hot gluing the bottom. And of course, the last step in this DIY is putting some hot glue on the back of our stick bunny and then hot gluing that down to the center of the frame. The next DIY is a really quick and easy one using one of these adorable stuffed bunnies from the Dollar Tree. Here's what you need to make it. This DIY is a super quick and easy one, and we're starting off with this little stuffed bunny I found at the Dollar Tree. I placed some floral wire through the back of the bunny's ears. That way I would be able to shape and mold the ears the way that I liked without adding the wire. The ears laid really flat and you couldn't really see them. Like I've mentioned a couple times before, I haven't been too lucky in finding a ton of stuff at my Dollar Tree. So using the craft board that I had mentioned earlier, I did cut out the shape of an egg. And to cover that plain craft board, I picked up some of this pretty scrapbooking paper and I cut it out into the egg shape before adhering it down using a glue stick. I liked the plain egg, but I wanted to add a cute saying, so I picked this "Spring is in the air" one. And to finish off our decorative egg, I attached a little raffia bow using a glue dot from the Dollar Tree. And the whole point of this DIY is it's supposed to have the bunny hiding behind the egg, and all that you can see are the bunny's cute little paws and feet and his ears sticking up. So that is why the egg is so much larger than the bunny. You could make a smaller egg so that you would see the bunny's cute face and it would be like he was holding it, but I wanted it to look like a giant egg that he couldn't carry and he was hiding behind. So to kind of achieve that a little bit more, I did pull his arms and his feet around the egg and hot glued them into place so it looked like he was struggling to hold up this big giant Easter egg. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.